first. So I've talked to you about dry conditions, where this would be dry in in drought periods, and in wet periods it would be naturally high.
Main goal is to make sure that our growers have water for their kids, their grandkids, and their great grandkids, as long as we can think along the lines. So we're looking at some really cool stuff. Geographically, where we're located, we're really fortunate. We sit right next to
Patty's entire power bill for all pumps, including D-Plant, when it pumped 80,000 acre-feet a year, was $50,000 a year, up to 2005. And now today, like I said, just running 80,000, just this facility alone, never mind all the other pumps in that year, it would cost about a little less than $2 million just for this pumping plant alone.
Yes, there isn't. There's only 3,500 I always get a kick out of this, breeding pairs in the lake of one variety, and the other one it's got 4,000 or 5,000. There's not they're just on the close of not being able to sustain themselves.
They're all real old.
And they're all old, so they can't do the deal. Now we're gonna
D-Plant pumping was not an if, it was a when D-Plant would turn on. And then we got to 2021, and they made us dry up Sump 1A for the first time in, what was it, John, 1.4 million years? 2.4 million years. So we accomplished that, which is fantastic. Go humans. There was only one known natural outlet, which was a lava tube called the Glory Hole at the very south end of the basin. Water and stories from journal entries on the Applegate Trail and a trail from people coming through here around the bottom end of the lake would see they'd write about this vortex out in the middle of or out off the shore in the lake when the lake was high. And it's still there today. I think it's all closed up, over time, but that was basically the only drain for this entire area. Reclamation actually utilized that by when they built Clear Lake Dam and the Lost River Diversion Channel to redivert Lost River water that used to come down here. And if you look
in 2022, we were the only water in the basin, in the Klamath Basin along the Pacific Flyway. At one point in February, we had 180,000 birds counted in the Klamath Basin, all of which were on KDD. So when we're talking about restricting water to agriculture, and I'm going to specifically say Klamath Drainage District, we're not just impacting growers, we're not just impacting economies, we're impacting a Pacific Flyway, and we're all keeping our fingers crossed. Tule Lake being filled back up is fantastic. We're starting to get some water out on Lower Klamath Refuge. We're all keeping our fingers crossed that the birds aren't gone forever and they'll recognize it, somehow smell it in the air and be thinking they need to come back over here. But
one thing, just to help you connect the dots in terms of the places that you have been and are going. So when we were up on that hill above Link River, it's possible. And then this flow through that Brad's talking about, and historically, you could have a drop of water diverted up there. It could be taken through Klamath Irrigation District, used, and excess would be recirculated. It could go over there into Modoc County. It could be used, recirculated, come back here into Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge, come here and be pumped through this facility over into the Lower Klamath Basin and Lower Klamath National Wildlife Refuge, and ultimately exit back to the Klamath River at the pumps that you were looking at by the highway and railroad. So that's a simplification of the complexity of the plumbing, but it's also an indication of the efficiency of use of water in this project. Water doesn't get wasted. If it's not used by farmer A, it's used by farmer B, then the refuge, and at the end of the day, if it's in the excess of everyone's needs, it goes back to the river.
We've identified here where the geography of the land created a perfect place for all types of species. Birds, wildlife, deer, elk, and people. People identified this place at least 10,000 years ago, maybe 17,000 years ago, as a great place to grow their families, a great place to grow their livelihoods, and to provide for themselves. And when more people came along, they identified that this was a great place to develop and further assist a growing country and a growing nation. Let's talk about laws first. So I talked to you about dry conditions, where this would be dry in in drought periods, and in wet periods it would be naturally high. So we've got records that show when Western folks came in and started measuring where lake levels were, they didn't actually see it, but they seen evidence of the lake being at around 41, 45 and some change based upon USVR data requirements. Today, the maximum elevation that can be achieved with the dam is 4143.3. So it's a reduction in actual natural high elevation, but we keep the water for longer. The Klamath tribes have a water claim that says that they need to have full pool in Upper Klamath Lake each and every year, 41.3 through the month of, I believe it's May or June. That's right, Paul?
Yeah.
Yep. They also have a water right claim that it can't go below 4140 by the end of the season in October. With that, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have said that for water quality purposes and for sucker rearing purposes, there's different elevations they would like to see on the lake. So the first one that's in the current biological opinion that it's been outdated and extended and it's set to expire this September is an elevation of 4142 point, or is it 4142 even, I believe it's 4142 even. For sucker spawning, so there's a small group of Lost River suckers, Lost River's over there, Lost River suckers, the Chewam, spawn over into some springs over the east side of Upper Klamath Lake, and the biological opinion says that those suckers need an elevation of at least 1 foot to spawn in those springs between the months of April and 31 May, or 1 April and 31 May. Now 1 foot of water is about that much. But if you look at the actual data and you look at where the water is at 4142, 90% of that sucker habitat is covered in elevations of 4138, or excuse me, 4139. So about 2 feet lower, at least 1 foot is covered. There's some data discrepancies in, I think, what Bureau of Reclamation looked at, and they've actually got 1 meter of water over those sucker habitats.
Moss did a pretty good job of kind of giving you the background of where you're at, why we're here, how we came to be, all that good stuff. I love this place on the tours. This is like my favorite place for really one reason. It shows the diversity of what we can do with water in the Klamath Reclamation Project, right here where we're standing. We can send water in every single direction right where we're standing, north, south, east, and west. So if you look right back over there, there's some head gates right along the railroad. That's called the 80 Canal, where the 80 Canal comes in water from the district and sends water back to the west to the Klamath River. So we can take water from the river and send it back to the river. Right up here, you can't see it too well where we're standing. There's a forebay. We call it the 84 bay. You can see some head gates out there. We can open water up and send water to the north out of that forebay. Test. Oh, there we go. So we can send water to the north from that forebay, but the 80 Canal naturally flows to the south. So we can send water north, south, east, and west, every single direction from right here. Later on, when we're heading over to our next stop, you're going to see we also have some recirculation pumping plants on the district where we can take the water that we bring onto the district, use it once, use it twice, use it 3 times, maybe even sometimes 4 times, over and over again, because we can pick it up and use it. I jokingly say it's no longer called H2O, it's just HO, because we've used it so many times. Sorry, that's a bad joke. So I'm gonna pass this on to my president, Bill Walker, and we also have Luther Horsley, who's a supervisor here for the district, also to talk about some of the cool stuff that we're doing. But KDD is a district that is known as a quote-unquote Warren Act district. Now, we do have some issues with how that's characterized or how we're prioritized within the Reclamation Bureau of Reclamation. But nonetheless, that's where we stand. So we do today sit at a lower priority than the rest of the project, than the KID, TID, and some other superior priority contracts. So that being said, we are in the process of trying to think creatively of things that we can do on the district to secure our water supply, hopefully in perpetuity. That's really our main goal, is to make sure that our growers have water for their kids, their grandkids, and their great-grandkids, as long as we can think along the line. So we're looking at some really cool stuff. Geographically, where we're located, we're really fortunate. We sit right next to, Moss might have mentioned it, on the highway coming down, the Tule Smoke Club that sits right on the other side of the railroad tracks over there. Potential prime habitat for suckers. Geographically, we look at where we're geographically located, the lower Klamath Lake. We're thinking we have opportunities to potentially be a part of a solution to help recover fish species as well. Not to mention that when our refuges go dry, we do have year-round water rights out here, and so we flood up our fields in the wintertime. And in 2022, we were the only water in the basin, in the Klamath Basin along the Pacific Flyway. At one point in February, we had 180,000 birds counted in the Klamath Basin, all of which were on KDD. So when we're talking about restricting water to agriculture, and I'm going to specifically say Klamath Drainage District, we're not just impacting growers, we're not just impacting economies, we're impacting a Pacific Flyway, and we're all keeping our fingers crossed. Tule Lake being filled back up is fantastic. We're starting to get some water out on Lower Klamath Refuge. We're all keeping our fingers crossed that the birds aren't gone forever and they'll recognize it, somehow smell it in the air and be thinking they need to come back over here. But when we do manage our water, so trying to think of the diplomatic way to say it, when we mismanage our water, that's about the best I can do. Fortunately, we have had the opportunity to exercise our fall and our winter water rights and be able to provide some habitat, even if it's only 180,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but when you count that and compared to millions of birds that used to be here during the migration, it's really not a whole lot. But it is something, and so it's kind of bittersweet to say that we can provide that. But frankly, we shouldn't be playing that role. Those refuges need to be playing that role. I will pause there. I'm going to hand this over to our president, Mr. Walker.
Well, I want to say good morning to everybody, and this is definitely a good Klamath potato planting morning. Maybe wind blowing. A little closer. Okay. Anyhow, I've got a few images that I want to put into you folks' minds, so as you go to the next place and you'll have some stuff to think about. One of the numbers that I really would like to get in your minds is that last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, there was 48,000 acre feet of water went up in 24 hours, went out the mountain to the river. That's enough water to run KDD for a year if we use our recirculation pumps. In 7 days, over 350,000 acre feet of water went out the mountain in Klamath, and that's more than what they want to give us this year. It affects all of us in the Klamath Basin, from the little kids to the folks that farm. Our ecosystem has been robbed since the water wars started in the late 90s. And when the shutoff happened in 2001, I happened to be driving down a ditch bank. I had to travel every day. And the first day there was there was a mama duck with a hatch of about 8 little ones. I'm not positive how many, only they're hiding in the weeds, and I gave them time to walk around me, and I went about my business. The next day I went down that same ditch bank. Well, there was less babies, and it was pretty evident that ditch was dry, and it was really sad. Well, a few more days, a few more predators, and last time I saw the mama duck, she had a broken wing, had 2 little babies. And I'll tell you what, it's almost enough to make me still want to tear up. And it's crazy. It's crazy that we have all these resources and we can't take care of our own ecosystem, because it affects everybody, whether it's the tribes, whether it's the farmers, whether it's the people on Main Street in Klamath Falls, or whoever. We need to be conscious of that. Since the water deal has been going on strong, they've listed the pond turtle. When my kids, which now are in their middle 40s, so it dates me a little bit, only when they were little kids, wherever I farmed, and I farmed from Keno to Bonanza to Tule Lake to Merrill Malin, you could find a pond turtle walking across the road all summer long. Now they enlisted them. We as the people of the Klamath Basin ought to be aware of it.
We're looking for a secure supply of water. So is the refuge. One thing we're really interested in is seeing if our canal can be a conduit to providing that security of water, not just for bird habitat, but they're also growing suckers down there now. So when we talk about trying to look for ways that we can be a part of the solution for recovering species, that's one of them. Right now, it's really in concept phase. What we've done is we've taken the 80 canal and we put it on a table and said, let's talk about it. Let's see if there's something we can do here. We haven't signed anything. There's nothing done yet, but we're exploring to see whether that makes sense for the district, if it makes sense for the refuge, and it makes sense for the fish as well. We've got a little bit of money, $1.8 million coming to us starting hopefully in May to continue on the feasibility of that. Hopefully that will identify, if it is feasible, what implementation of something like that would cost, and we can put a budget together and start trying to seek some funds out on that. I do have a 2-pager here that I'm going to share with you guys. I'm going to wait till we get on the bus so we can all warm up though. But I'm happy to take more questions about that while we're at lunch in a warmer area, or now if you guys want to hang on and enjoy the weather. So down right there, you can see kind of the base of Mount Shasta right there. That's to the south. Our district sits right adjacent to the refuge on the California side. As Bill noted, we do have Area K. Those are lease lands, so those are actual, lands that people grow stuff on. They grow grass and grain. But on the south side of State Line Road, on the California side, generally speaking, that's really where they're looking to do some habitat improvements relative to water, relative to growing fish, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm not quite sure what the final outcome is going to look like. They're still looking at all that too. We have a meeting this afternoon to look at some updated LiDAR that we had flown last year, late last year, and so that's really going to be the start of what a design may look like on the refuge.
Hi everybody, my name is Brad Kirby. I'm the manager of Tule Lake Irrigation District. You're here at D plant or pumping plant D. I guess just for a little background on D plant, just the where we're at in the project. I don't know who all of you are familiar with the plumbing of the Klamath Project, but basically just out to the east here, just beyond those trees, is Tule Lake Sump 1A. It's the largest portion of what remains of what was ancient Tule Lake. I think it was called Rhett Lake before that, but that was what was drained, and that's all that remains of it to reclaim for homesteading in the early 1900s, starting in the early 1900s through the late 40s. TID, as far as the west side of the Klamath Project, is kind of the bottom end, the bottom of the barrel before you kind of take a loop back up. This is a closed basin. I believe at one point, if Medicine Lake Highlands weren't there sometime eons ago in history, the flow would have been down south towards the pit, towards the CVP, but the Medicine Lake Highlands erupted and that shield volcano formed and kind of closed this basin off. So that's why Tule Lake, as it was formed years and years ago, there was only one known natural outlet, which was a lava tube called the Glory Hole at the very south end of the basin. Water and stories from journal entries on the Applegate Trail and a trail from people coming through here around the bottom end of the lake would see they'd write about this vortex out in the middle of or out off the shore in the lake when the lake was high. And it's still there today. I think it's all closed up, over time, but that was basically the only drain for this entire area. Reclamation actually utilized that by, when they built Clear Lake Dam and the Lost River Diversion Channel to redivert Lost River water that used to come down here. And if you look, you can kind of see that kind of dome-shaped mountain over there, and then those off to the right, the far kind of rolling hills there. Right on the other side of that is Clear Lake. And from there, Lost River meanders from the north side of Clear Lake all up through Bonanza, wraps around kind of like southeast of Klamath Falls, comes through Merrill, and then right into here into this area, which anyway, so all the water in that watershed starts right there, meanders around, gets lost for a while. I guess that's why they call it Lost River, and then comes back right here, not too far from where it started, back into California. Like I said, there was no natural outlet save for the Glory Hole. Once the water level got down below that, it was just left up to evaporation, and by way of developing the Lost River Diversion Channel, they could take Lost River water that would naturally come down here. They were able to build the head up so that they could push the water over into the Klamath River instead of coming down here. So they allowed this area to dry out, and as it dried out, they developed the canals and drains and started with 45 acre plots, and they got bigger over time, and then opened those up to homesteading starting in, I think, 1917 was the first round. My family came in 1927 in the second round. So I'm technically I'm a fifth generation homesteader here. Been born and raised and just left for college for a little while and came back to work. And all that would be protected from flooding. Otherwise, this place would just fill back up, just like it was a lake. So all this was lake bottom out here. So they went up here, Sheepy Ridge, right to the west side here. I guess your left, my right. And you can see that concrete tower right there. At the base of that is about a 5'8" tunnel. That is 1.25 miles long through the base of Sheepy Ridge. And almost exactly 1.25 miles. I say 5'8" because I'm 5'7". When we walk through it, there's one little place. I can walk standing straight up. There's one little place that I hit the button of my hat on every time. I tell that story every time I come and do this spiel too. That right there is basically it's a glorified standpipe. So it's open air on the top. These pumps, I'll get into the details of these pumps in a few seconds. But these pumps basically lift it's about 80 foot lift. Lower Klamath is a higher elevation than Tule Lake, so lifts it up, puts it into that box there, discharge box, and then it's a gravity-fed tunnel from there. So it's not pressurized, it just lifts it. These pumps are just meant to lift it to that tower, and then that tunnel, it's only from the bottom on this side to the bottom on the other side, it's only an 8-foot drop over 1.25 miles. And you can see the little pinhole light at the end of the tunnel when you stand on either side. So we always say there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Oh yeah, so thank you. They actually in '42 they built this building actually, and when you come in here take a look at things, you can see the building actually ended after the third pump. So there's 5 units in here, and they deemed in like 46, I think 46 or 47, they came in and they wanted to add to the capacity of D plant. So they took out the wall. Downstairs they just knocked out a little doorway, but up here they knocked out the whole north wall and added onto the building and added two more pumps per minute. Anyway, but and then you turn the 5th one on and you only get about a quarter of it. So really, with 5 units running, which has happened at least once that I know of in history, back in the 63, 64 Christmas Day flood, they had all 5 pumps running and sump 1A was coming up. Anyway, this is basically strictly a flood control facility when it was designed. TID bears 100% of the cost of O&M. D plant, for whatever reason, when Reclamation decided to do their contracts with the district, all the other facilities that are like multi-benefit facilities or something like that, like Clear Lake Dam, the diversion channel, actually the extension of D plant, which is pumping plants E and F, well, E, EE, F, and FF. Those are all what they call reserved works, and they were never transferred to any one district. D plant came along with the 56 contract to TID. So TID pays 100% of that, of the cost of O&M. Reclamation still owns all the infrastructure and facilities, but TID operates and maintains them and is responsible for the cost of that. Now, beyond that, in that 100%, 98% of that cost is not spread over our 63,000 or so acres, all of TID evenly. It's only spread over the 17,302 acres of the Tule Lake lease lands, which is the lands just on the other side of Sump 1A, down to the south and around Sump 1B, and down to here to the south we call, that's the League in the Frog Pond, and down here is the Southwest Sump. And those are federally leased lands within the Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge, so the land is owned by Fish and Wildlife, which is also in the Department of Interior with Bureau of Reclamation, but the Bureau of Reclamation administers the lease land program, and TID operates the system and delivers the irrigation water. And there's anyway, so the Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge is in our backyard, and within TID's system, we have a fairly close relationship, working relationship with this office right here, just up the road that you passed, their new facility. Those leases are leased. These guys, John would be able to talk way better about the lease land program and things like that. But real quick, kind of got the plumbing and how this goes and what D plan is. I think, I was talking to John earlier, one of the biggest aspects that we have changed. I mentioned that D plant was designed strictly because, with all the water wars that we have today, you think this would have never been a problem. But the actual problem when they came to build this place was getting rid of water. We had too much water 100 years ago, and we needed to get rid of it. And now we can't get any. That's where we're at today. But like I said, flood control facility, we and TID and my board have been extremely supportive of what we're calling a flow-through concept. And we believe that what has happened over the last couple decades, basically by shutting the Klamath Project off, reducing the amount of water that flows through, comes into the irrigation system, filters through the ground, ends up in the drains, gets ultimately reused over and over and over again, ultimately to end up in the Tule Lake sumps, either 1A or 1B or both when they're connected, and then and historically would be pumped through D plant over to Lower Klamath, which would then, in theory, go through the straight drain back out to the Klamath River, about 11 miles from where it was diverted to begin with. And we are really encouraging and trying to get support for this flow through concept. 3 or 4 years, well, it's been about 4 years ago, I would have I would have told myself that I was crazy for ever wanting to run this facility 1 second. And now we just this last year, like about a month and a half ago, we turned it on for the first time in 4 years, and it was a welcome thing. The entire ecosystem, because everybody lost. I feel, in my personal opinion, lost their way a couple decades ago, and decided that shutting the Klamath Project off was the answer, and it was the exact opposite of what needed to happen. And I hope one day, it always seems like we're getting somewhere, but never really do. We always end up watching the same movie over and over again, and I'm getting tired of watching that movie. The only other thing I can think of, and I'll shut up for a minute, is I mentioned the cost of running D-plant. Like I said, 98% of that is borne by the leased land farmers. D-plant today, well, I'll say historically, prior to ESA and prior to the power rate increase when the contracts with Pacific Power and the predecessor Copco, years ago with the first one, prior to that running out in 2005, and the entire Klamath project, the California side ramped up over a 4-year period instead of 7 years on the Oregon side, but ramped up to full tariff, and there have been steady increases ever since then.
Can save those fish if we're really going to worry about fish. But as long as we overpower it with 78-degree water out of Upper Klamath Lake, and that's 60% of the flow in the river, those fish cannot survive that. Not just salmon and steelhead, but sturgeon and eulachon and eels, all of the fisheries in the Klamath River. They can't stand that temperature of water. So we have to deal with that. We have to let the tributaries dilute the temperature of that water to the point that it's stable and successful for fish.
Klamath Basin, Tule Lake. Our homestead is just kind of back about 3 miles from here, off to the northeast of this location we're standing at. And this is what you call Copic Bay, and where you just came from, the Tule Lake Sumps, is kind of the north end of what we would call the Panhandle. And so the lake used to back up down into this area and into the other area. So these were the last areas that were kind of drained off of the lake to create all this farmland that you see behind you and that you drove through. This was the last area to be homesteaded. So my grandfather homesteaded in 1947. My dad was a month old when he moved down here, and he's right behind you running backhoe there. We're getting ready to plant onions in that field hopefully this afternoon yet. And the tracks you see out across there are actually fertilizer buggy tracks, and the white you see on top of the ground is fertilizer. So we're in the throe of it right now, trying to get all our crops in the ground. So kind of an exciting time of the year. Spring is always something that we look forward to, because it was a little bit of promise of trying to do something better than you did last year. And so we're planting grain. We're just finishing our horseradish harvest today, our spring harvest. So our family grows horseradish, onions, garlic, peppermint and spearmint for tea leaf, along with cereal grains and alfalfa, and that's kind of our balance of our rotation that we move around. We employ, the peak of our season, we employ between 110, 120 people, and right now I think we're probably around 85 people that we have employed right now during our spring harvest, and those employees will go right from working in the horseradish operation. They'll start working in the spearmint and the peppermint and the organics and our organic garlic, and trying to clean up fields, and we'll keep them employed until November. So people like to work for us because it means long-term employment while they're here in the basin, which most of them are actually, they used to be called migrant labor. They're not so migrant anymore. They've set roots here, they've got families here, and they look for year-long jobs to keep them employed and keep their houses heated and their kids going to school here. They're part of our community. So that's a little bit about me. I've got three children. My wife Sarah and I run the farm now, and like The lava tubes that came into this basin were actually used to drain water away from this. And the Medicine Lake Highlands and the Shield volcano that's down to the south of us, this water used to flow to the Sacramento via the Pitt River. So all this water that used to be here was dammed up by the Shield volcano. That backed it up into this area, and that's how we ended up with a lake here. That's also part of the way that we got rid of the water here, by getting water back to those lava tubes. And who knows where that water went, but we can assume that it ended up back in the Pitt River system. As they drained this back and they developed the farmland, and people started coming and making trips to this area and starting to try to understand the geology of the area, the history of the area. We've got a pretty diverse history here. It's not just tribal, it's not just farmers, it's also that we had an internment camp that was nearby here. And so this mountain that's behind me is used to be part of our family farm, and we traded it to Fish and Wildlife. I don't know, probably 20 years ago that we did that, 25. But there's a lot of history on this wall, and it's a pretty unique spot to look at, and then think about what this meant, what this valley is, and how it came to be, and the history that's behind it. And so I'm going to invite you to come up here and look at the wall, and you're going to see, the lava beds, Petroglyphs, is over here at Prisoner Rock on the other side facing to the west. And when you're at that point, the winds come out of the west, the snow, the sand, everything wears on those rocks. And this is protected. I mean, this is not a bad place to stand today, because I can tell you I've been standing in wind all day. But this is a protected spot. And so a lot of the writing that are on the walls here have been protected by that. And so you see this white that's right behind the speaker here, and that was actually done by an archaeologist, that he came and painted it, because when they got here, they were black and white cameras. They had a hard time getting it to show up. And so they painted it white so that they could make out on pictures, what it actually was on the rocks. The tribes that were here at that time didn't know what that language was. So if you think about that and the evolution of this basin, and it's all over these rocks, ancient languages, modern languages, and language of some of the people that were probably wronged by our nation in the terms of the internment camp. But you will see that the tribal signs that are on here, and the further up you look, you start to realize they're all over the place. And you'll notice some of these flat rocks that don't really have a ledge right below them. The only way that they could do that was by doing it off of the ice or out of a boat that they could ride on that.
I was going to chime in when he said it, but just talking about the reach that we have with being the main distributor for Walmart on California. If you look at our Thanksgiving orders, if you factor in all of everything we shipped at Thanksgiving, close to 16 million people had our potatoes at Thanksgiving dinner. And it's like, that's a lot of people. Like, it's a lot of people. So that's something pretty cool that is really important for us being here, like I said.
If you drive down here, you can get your own 50-pound box for
anytime,
Thanksgiving.
$20, yeah. All right. How they do it in Europe, it's kind of where this whole idea came from. Everything in this line was from Holland, that's from New Zealand, that's from the Netherlands, New Zealand, Denmark, Germany. It's all different European style equipment. But so the potatoes after being stored in the boxes out there, they have the capacity to run either out of trucks or out of these boxes. Kind of around this way. It's a little dirty, a little wet, but we'll go around.
And folks, everything that you're seeing on this side in this building is organic. All these cans are organic. Howdy.
Having a good day?
Always.
Good.
This is good with me. I don't care how organic